Namaste. Amen and blessed be. We humans have wondered about the problem of evil for as long as we've wondered about anything. And judging from the chuckles at our introductory remarks, we're still wondering quite a bit. As Alexander's mother explained to him, we all have terrible, no good, very bad days, even in Australia. But why? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen at all? And how can we transform the bad into good? For the month of January, we'll be talking about evil here at Tapestry. I feel like the church lady every time I say that word here. The intergenerational reading sort of set up evil to be a little more lighthearted of a concept than it really should be. The challenges that Alexander faced were frustrating for a young boy, no doubt. But as we talk about evil this month, I hope that we have the courage to delve into some more significant issues, some real human challenges, and hold them up to the light. Now, my goal today isn't to answer the theological question of evil, or why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? That's a fun conversation, and it's a good lecture as an introduction to theology, but it doesn't make for a very good sermon. Instead, today I want to talk about some of the ways that we can respond when evil emerges in our lives. Call it evil or something else. Some very bad things happen in this world, this good world. Bad things happen in our good lives. So what gives? How do we respond with integrity and hope? Today I'm going to talk about 3 different ways that we can respond to evil in our lives, and they aren't mutually exclusive. You don't have to pick one answer and stick with it forever and ever. But it's a good idea to notice what response feels right to you, and notice when your response changes over time. Now, Buddhism invites us to respond to evil by starting with compassion. It's a good starting place, Buddhism, because Buddhism sort of hinges on this realization that life is hard. We all suffer from a yearning, a constant yearning, and that yearning is really a fundamental part of the human experience. In a couple of different ways, compassion can help us deal with that suffering that's in us and all around us. First of all, compassion brings context to our own experience. It helps us know that we're not alone. If we take the time to notice and care deeply about the challenges of other people, we come to realize that we are not alone. And as we cultivate compassion for our own suffering, we're better able to understand the suffering of others. Knowing that we're not alone doesn't make the hard times go away, but knowing that we're not alone can certainly make hard times a little more bearable. Now, the other way that compassion responds to evil is that it brings an opportunity for joy. This is sort of the meditation version of taking lemons and making lemonade. Buddhists take compassion very seriously. It's not just a handshake or a mental being aware of someone else's hardship. It's a deep experience of loving kindness. Compassion is a beautiful and powerful feeling. Some people describe it as a sensation of warmth that they experience in the center of their chest, a feeling of love with focus. Now, there's a meditation practice called metta that's all about cultivating this sense of compassion, this warming experience of love. And we did a version of that in our opening hymn this morning. I was hesitant to use that hymn because it's so mellow, but I think we got into it. I love that hymn, actually. In meditation, you start by feeling your own experience of challenge and suffering in the world, and you know that it's unpleasant, and you feel compassion for yourself. Remember, compassion, though, isn't just a thought. It's a deep feeling of love and kindness warming in your heart. And the next step, just like in the song, is to see the challenges and the suffering of other people. And knowing that their suffering, like yours, isn't a choice, you feel compassion for them. And the circles reach out broader and broader to include perhaps strangers or even people that you have problems with. When faced with evil or suffering, we often jump to wanting to fix the problem, especially as Unitarian Universalists. In a way, that is a part of compassion. But some problems are out of our control. Either we don't have the resources to do anything about them, or we don't have the expertise, and some problems, frankly, are just not fixable. Buddhism invites us to experience the feeling of compassion as a worthwhile goal in itself. Of course, thoughts and actions and words and work are all interconnected in Buddhist life, but it starts with a basic feeling of compassion. And I know if you don't have a personal meditation experience, what I've just described may sound pretty out there. But I have to say, from my personal experience, cultivating compassion for myself has been the singular most helpful spiritual practice so far in my life. Learning to genuinely be there for myself, to feel deep compassion for myself, has gotten me through some seriously tough times. And spending the time to understand my own suffering has given some better window to better relate to the suffering of other people. I know it sounds simple, but in the face of evil, compassion is a surprisingly powerful response, and it's a good place to start. The second response to evil that I want to talk about today comes from Ecclesiastes, the source of the reading and that beautiful hymn, or the beautiful song that the choir sang. Ecclesiastes is a book in the Hebrew Bible, but what's so interesting about it and why I love it is that it goes against what 99% of religion teaches us, and against what in the core of our being we want to believe. We want to believe that the world is fair. We want to believe that our work will be rewarded fairly, that we can be safe if we try. And all of human society is structured around this sense of fairness and creating ways where we can get along. And we work our tails off to bring about more justice in the world. But sometimes that sense of fairness gets expanded into a broader level. Sometimes we think that the universe should be fair. There are lots of ways that that fairness comes out, and some of them we might laugh at, and other ways we sort of unwittingly embrace or fall into. One version that you may be familiar with is the prosperity gospel. Does this sound familiar? Tens of millions of Christians embrace this prosperity gospel, and I would guess that a good number of other religious traditions do as well. It's the belief that God provides material wealth for those he favors. I say he intentionally there. It's a driving message behind a lot of the mega churches. Our neighbors at Saddleback do not embrace the prosperity gospel, I should say. It sounds silly to most of us. Pray harder, give more money to your church, and God will bless you with more income. It's a cosmic cash machine theology. But There's a sneakier version of prosperity gospel that appeals to Unitarian sense of fairness and our open-mindedness toward mystery. Some call it the law of attraction. A few years ago, a very popular book and movie came out titled The Secret that advocated this idea that the universe will respond with whatever you project. If you want to be healthy, wealthy, wise, and loved, you must first project positivity into the world. And that's all well and good. Positivity is great for everyone. But what about the inverse of this theory? What about those people whose lives are steeped in pain? Did those who are sick, poor, lost, and lonely somehow bring that upon themselves? Did they not pray hard enough or send the wrong vibes out to the universe? Whether it's the prosperity gospel or the secret or karma in some ways that we misunderstand karma, this interconnection of the concepts is our desperate desire for the universe to be fair. But the author of Ecclesiastes has a very different message. He tells us that life changes and life is pretty random. Evil and goodness fall into our laps in uncontrollable and unpredictable ways. From the beloved song, we hear that there's a time for everything. So you would be wise to appreciate the moment if you're enjoying it. Or if evil comes knocking at your door, find some solace in knowing that this too shall pass. Regardless of your intention or even your actions, the seasons are going to continue to turn. Vanity of vanities, the author of Ecclesiastes tells us. It's complete vanity to think that you have somehow earned the life that you live through the morality of your actions. It's vanity to think that you have fate all figured out like an equation that you can manage. It's actually a really humbling message for healthy Americans. The life that you enjoy, the comfort and freedom that you think are your own, were assigned pretty randomly. You could be a Bolivian peasant, a Chinese farmer, an Egyptian aristocrat perhaps, or a Nigerian oil field worker. You could have been rich or poor, born with any type of body, or struck with any sort of affliction. Life is not fair, and neither is the universe. Now, removing that morality from fate is pretty radical and a little bit scary. People are getting a little squirmy in your seats. But it can also be liberating. It means that no one deserves evil. I want to repeat that because that's a key theme for our month. No one deserves the evil that befalls them. This is what Ecclesiastes has to offer our discussion of evil. When confronted with pain and suffering, there's some solace in knowing that this too shall pass. And there's some solace in knowing that no one deserves this hardship. It's not your fault. The last response to evil that I want to talk about today is grace and prayer. Many of us, in fact, I would dare say most of us, have turned to prayer when the going gets tough. Sometimes in life, you've done all you can do, and it's time to ask for a little help or at least some guidance. Now, I'm using prayer here, both in the sense of a conversation with God or as a shorthand for numerous other ways of connecting with the divine. Maybe it's song, art, dance, appreciating nature, acting, contemplation, or just quiet. Prayer means 1,000 different things, and it has a great power to orient our lives toward what is most sacred. It's powerful. One of the most powerful and most common human responses in the face of evil is to pray for some grace. Now, if you're listening closely, you're probably thinking, didn't he just talk about how bogus that prosperity gospel was and the secret? Didn't he just say that it was ultimate vanity to think that you have it all figured out? Well, sort of. There's an important difference between prosperity gospel or the secret and the type of prayer that I'm advocating for. Because sincere prayer isn't a bargaining with God. It's not expecting specific results for saying the right words or doing the right deeds. Real prayer is an open-ended invitation. It's a request without expectations. Our closing hymn today is Amazing Grace, and we'll sing it partially as a reminder that sometimes in the face of evil, all we can do is pray. But like I said, it's not a quid pro quo arrangement. There's no guarantee, and grace is not cheap. Last year, I preached an entire sermon about that hymn, Amazing Grace. So I want to remind you briefly of what I said in that sermon. The popular lore about the song, I think there was even a movie, I need to see it, was that the writer, John Newton, was the captain of a slave ship, and that he wrote this tremendous hymn as a response to a terrible storm one night at sea. He almost died. And the popular lore is that he had a conversion experience that turned his life around, and it was amazing grace in an instant. But that's not what really happened. John Newton had a rough life from the beginning. His father was a sailor and almost always gone at sea. He began his career sailing as a young boy, and he got himself into all sorts of trouble. He had a rough and pretty morally, I'll say, complicated life. Over and over again in his early years, he found God and lost his faith, and he found God again and he lost his faith. It's true that the inspiration from the song did come from a near-death experience on a slave ship that he was the captain of. But his life didn't immediately change course. After that night, his sailing career continued for several years. He didn't settle down with his wife until his body was literally too worn out and he couldn't sail anymore. This was at the age of 30. That's a rough 30 years. So slowly, after settling in with his wife, they grew rooted in their church life, and he eventually became an ordained minister. But even then, as a minister, he was committed to using common language and hanging out with the common people, and he caught a lot of flack for it. Grace wasn't easy for John Newton. The song is a little misleading that way. Grace isn't quick. It's not a one-time conversion experience. Real grace isn't easy or quick for anyone, but it's powerful, and it's worth asking for, especially when we come face to face with evil in our lives. So the final response to evil is prayer. Pray with your heart, with your mind, your song, your body. Pray with your dance, in your garden, in your kitchen. Pray by nurturing your children and others in need. Pray with the spirit of abundance in nature, with inspiration in a great book, or pray on a canvas or in your knitting needles. This sermon has covered a lot of territory, maybe too much. So I want to briefly summarize before I finish. There are a lot of ways to respond to evil with integrity and hope. When you witness evil in the world, take a note from the Buddha. Find compassion for yourself and for other people where you can. And let the loving kindness that you feel be a warming comfort. And know that no one is alone in their suffering. Another possible response to evil comes from the author of Ecclesiastes. He tells us, relax a little bit. Know that this is not your fault. To think so is actually pretty vain. Just enjoy the good moments and know that the bad ones will pass. Because there's nothing you can do to keep the seasons of chance from turning. And finally, when all else fails, pray. Pray for compassion, pray for patience, and pray for another chance, another day. Amen.